Okay, 20 facts that you should know about the Antichrist. Because we're in the last days, there's a lot of discussion about what we should be looking for, and especially about the Antichrist, right? So it doesn't cease to end where people always want to, say that they figured it out. I remember first getting saved back in the 1980s and people saying Reagan is the Antichrist. If you break down the vowels of his name, into Greek and transliterate it and then cross-reference it and then put it through a sifter, it comes out with equals 666, or something like that. Look, there's a spirit of Antichrist, which means things that oppose Christianity, things that oppose God's holy nature, things that oppose absolutes like you shall not lie, things that we're seeing now just opposing meritorious work. In other words, being on time, telling the truth, that these are, somehow oppressive, racist views. This is the spirit of Antichrist. But there is going to be Antichrist, false Antichrist, and there's going to be one true finale, the guy that the Bible calls the son of perdition, the beast, that he is the lawless one. And the difference between him and the others is that he is endowed with power by Satan. He's chosen by Satan. He's led and, I don't want to say blessed, right? Empowered, but total backing by Satan. And so I'm going to give you these 20 points. I'm not going to read through the passages just for the sake of time, but I will put the points up with passage links so that you can look them up later if you'd like. So the first fact, the first thing you want to look at is that the Antichrist is going to be energized by Satan himself. This is the difference between the Antichrist and other false Christs who are going to rise up. And there have been many since Jesus said that, right? What we have here is that this is the one who puts forth not just an Antichrist spirit, but Satan's agenda to be worshipped and to go into the temple, to persecute the Jews, and all these other things that we're going to get into. Now, who is he? One of the key clues we're going to look at is number 2, and here's the second fact, is that he will be a Jew. That he will, it says in Daniel 11:37 that he doesn't regard the God of his fathers. Now, some people try to say that this means he's a Christian and had Christian parents and he rejected that. That's not at all what it's saying in Old Testament vernacular. The God of the fathers, the patriarchs, is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He doesn't hold to the covenant that God made with David, with Abraham, with Isaac, with Israel or Jacob. And that but he's going to be a Jew because the Jews are looking for their Messiah, the false Messiah, to come. The Jews are looking for him to be the son of David. So he's going to be from the tribe of Judah, from the lineage of David, best as they can tell. Now, they've done a lot of work in genetics and DNA to kind of narrow down who they think belongs to what tribe. So they're probably pretty close to knowing with I wouldn't say pinpoint accuracy, but with moderately high accuracy of what tribe you belong to, or if you have Jewish blood in you. We now have 23andMe, and we've got, this background ancestry.com, and you can send that stuff in and see where your genealogy lies, right? And they think that they've narrowed it down so they can pick out the 12 tribes. And they're not going to accept just a Gentile. That's why people saying, oh, it's Putin, or it's Trump, or it's Reagan, or it's Obama, or it's all these people. It's not going to fit unless it's a Jewish individual. then maybe you need to take a second look, right? So Daniel 11:37 talks about he's not going to regard the God of the forefathers. Third fact is he will not have a desire for women. That's also in Daniel 11:37. Some people take from this that he'll be a homosexual. Maybe. But the general understanding would be is that he's unmarried. Just like Jesus was unmarried. He's focused on his Father's mission. Although his father is the devil, right? And so he's not going to be married. He's going to be single. Or if it's the aberrant kind of understanding of the text that he's a homosexual, it'll most likely be hidden. Because that will turn off most Jews. Until maybe when he reveals himself, then he may come forward. Coming out of the closet is nothing like coming forward and proclaiming that you are God, the son of Satan. So it's crazy. Third fact that we covered is that he won't have the desire of women. Fourth fact is that he will do everything according to his own selfish will. That's in Daniel 11:36. So this is not an individual who is like Christ. Okay, most people are selfish. But this is contrasting Jesus in Philippians chapter 2, who didn't regard his own heart, who thought it not robbery that he, being God, being equal in every aspect of God, didn't think it robbery to become man to serve us and to die on the cross. It's the opposite with this person. He is a man. He's not regarded highly in the sense of he's honorable. There's nothing about him that's really praiseworthy, but he desires praise. He thinks himself, great. He's heady. He wants to be worshipped, and he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve the honor. Jesus deserves the glory and honor because it says he'll be raised up and his name will be exalted because he humbled himself and became a servant, where this person is prideful and forces other people into servitude. So it's that contrast that's going on there. The fifth fact is he will be an intellectual genius. In Daniel 8:23. Now, not genius in the sense of wise. Genius in the sense of he knows a lot of facts. He can work facts. He'll be able to, he won't be a dummy. He's not going to have leaders following him if he's, illiterate and can articulate things. That actually brings us to the sixth fact, is that he'll be a genius as far as being an orator. And this idea of him being this persuasive speaker harkens back to false leaders and messiahs, that they can articulate very well and rally people like Hitler did, other people who can motivate people. This guy's going to have persuasive arguments, and he'll be able to state it in eloquent ways, in ways that cause people to follow him over all other leaders, to turn over rights to him, as they did in Nazi Germany, as they allowed people to be persecuted and agree with them. And he's going to come in, be able to do that. Also, in the seventh fact is that he'll be a political genius. This is in Revelation 17:11 through 12. Now, it doesn't say particularly that he's going to be, uses the term genius either in the Hebrew or Greek, right? But I'm using the term genius in the sense of he's going to be head and shoulders intellectually in these areas above everybody else on the world, because he has otherworldly help. He has, interdimensional satanic help. And so because of that, he's going to come across as knowing things he shouldn't know because of familiar spirits. He's going to have this phenomenal access to world history, to people's hearts, to what's going on. And so manipulating world leaders, world powers, it's going to be quite easy for him. And, who knows, going in there, blackmailing people, doing other things. That's not beyond the pale of someone like this. But even if he didn't do that, and Scripture doesn't say he does, we know that he gets a conglomeration of nations, at least 10 to begin with, maybe 13, wipes out 3 of the leaders, consolidates it into 10 world confederacy leaders, and then for a short period of time he has almost the entire world following him. This guy's going to be a political genius. Number 8, he will be a commercial genius. Daniel 11:43, also in Revelation 13, commercial genius means that he's going to be able to control the economy. You know, they talk about, like in Bitcoin, you have whales that come in because they have a massive amount of Bitcoin. They can control how it goes up and down. People in the markets are also sometimes called whales, or these people who can control massive bits of information to sway the stock market. They can make it go up and down just by a few announcements and then cash in on that. This individual is going to be a commercial genius in the sense of he's going to control the world's economy. He's going to make it so people aren't going to be able to buy or sell without allegiance to him. And he's going to sell this concept because he's promising peace. He's promising these things, which brings us to our next point. Number 9, fact number 9 is he'll be a military genius. Talks about in Revelation 6:2, also in Revelation 13:2. In 6:2, he's the white rider on the horse who comes out. Now, some people mistakenly call this Christ. Christ is never seen as having a bow and arrow. It's always he attacks with the sword or the word from his mouth. And Christ isn't revealed to the end of the tribulation period. This person coming out is at the beginning of the tribulation period, where the Antichrist reveals himself. And the Antichrist comes with power and authority and speaking peace and prosperity, but brings war. And we see this in this character in the first of the 4 apocalyptic horsemen. All the horsemen of the apocalypse bring devastation, decimation, and this would be no different. This isn't Christ bringing even judgment or salvation. This is the Antichrist pretending to be a Christ-like Messiah on a white horse, pretending to be pure, pretending to bring peace, but it's through war, where Jesus brought peace because he gave himself. And what we see in the 10th fact, and we're halfway through here, in the 10th fact, he's going to be a religious genius. He's going to control and monopolize the world. He's going to call himself God, go into the temple, allow the temple to be rebuilt, go into that temple, call himself God. But even the other religions, like there's a one world religion that comes up, the Whore of Babylon, he's going to destroy the seat of power of this religious society and proclaim himself as the only true religion. And so he's going to actually get millions upon millions of followers, not secretly, because he calls himself God, and then he says, unless you worship the beast, okay, and take the mark of the beast, taking a mark for somebody is like becoming a bondslave, like taking a tattoo and putting their name on you. I'm not saying it's a tattoo. It's probably not a chip. It's a physical allegiance to him. A one world government, one world religious leader who is against Christ and makes Christ to be the bad guy and is rallying the world to rebel against Christ and to go into hedonism, selfishness, lawlessness. And we'll see that happen. Okay, I'm trying to kind of put these in chronological order as much as possible, like his character, how he comes to be, who's backing him, and then events and things that are going to happen with him. I've already said a few of them, but so I get ahead of myself. But fact number 11, he's going to be the master of deceit. In 2 Thessalonians 2:10, other places, he's going to talking about how he's going to have signs and wonders. He's going to have a lying tongue, not just as an orator, speaker, and that sort of thing, but there's going to be wonders and signs in heaven that even the elect And it's talking about the Jews are going to be fooled for a while. 3.5 years, they're going to hail him as their Messiah. Forget Jesus. He came and he was murdered on the cross. He didn't fulfill what the Messiah was supposed to do. This is the guy. And then when he proclaims himself God and begins to persecute him, they're like, we got it all wrong. Then they begin to say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And that's the last 3.5 years of tribulation. Number 12, fact number 12. He will begin by controlling Western power bloc. We talked about this. Revelation 17 talks about how there's a number of these nations that give themselves over to the Antichrist. We see this in Daniel as well. These are the 10 toes, this partial made up structure of power that is subordinate to the Antichrist. Remember when Nebuchadnezzar has the vision of the statue and the head of gold and the rest silver, and then you got bronze, and it goes down the body until you get to this clay mixed with iron. It's not as strong, and this rock comes out of heaven and destroys it. Well, that's Christ coming back to the earth and destroying it after he gets this Western European conglomeration of states. Now, that may unfold to something like 10 segments of the world and the world population, but it generally looks like he's going to get something like a NATO environment. He may come up in the old Roman Empire area and begin to take over, because it kind of bleeds a little bit of that. It's part of the legs, but it's part of the toes, but it's not all iron, some of it's clay. So you kind of get this meshing and melding of the old with the new. And we'll see him rise up somewhere and take over either as a political individual or a financial individual, very well off, a think tank leader type of thing, or all three. I'm thinking it's going to be all three. And then he will be a political leader and a military leader as time goes on. But it starts off with these 10 states. Daniel also talks about how it's these 10 horns because 3 of the horns are assassinated, destroyed, and is consolidated. So it could be as many as 13 states, but then 3 individuals who resist him are going to be wiped out, and those are absorbed into the other power. So what we see is 13. He will make a 7-year covenant with Israel, but he'll break it after 3.5 years. This comes from Daniel 9:27. The prince who is to come is going to make a covenant of peace with Israel. And I believe that we're seeing the first, if they're not actual highways, at least they're stepping stones for this to happen when we see this Abraham Accord going on that the United States is brokering between Israel and these foreign Arab entities like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. We begin to see, and other nations are waiting. I think they're waiting to see what's going to happen in this year's election with President Trump in 2020. If he's going to continue, then they may sign on, places like Saudi Arabia. Because why would they do that with Israel? And why would they allow a covenant that exchanges embassies, which means that you can have sovereign soil on our nation, which is like anathema. That's like no for Islam, right? That's saying Israel has a right to the land. If you say we're putting our embassy over here, then we're recognizing you as a legitimate country, which the Arabs were saying, no, it's Palestine, it's the Palestinians. But the Palestinians, they don't want peace. They tried to bring them to the table, and they're not. And they're saying, you know what, we're going to go around you now. We're done. 70 years of this. We're done. Isn't that significant that it's been roughly 70 years, just a little over 70 years for this? So they're saying Israel has a right to be there. They're not giving up any land. Matter of fact, they're starting trade options with these countries, airlines going directly in there, and worship to happen at the Al-Aqsa Mosque there in Jerusalem. But a part of that agreement is going to be, look, if we can go there and worship, you can build your temple right next to it then. And we'll live in peace, you be in the temple. It fits Revelation 11, right? That measure the temple, but not this part, because this outer court's given to the Gentiles. Wow. We are definitely in the last days. So he makes a 7-year agreement that they can start a peace. And I think that it's key that what he does allows the temple either be ramped up or he starts the building of the temple. Almost all the money for the temple is already in. The architectural for the temple is already done. All they need is permission to go ahead and build it and have somebody who says, we'll protect you so you don't have war. There's got to be some kind of agreement with the Arab nations. These Arab nations do not like Iran. They are afraid of Iran, so they're gathering together with Israel and opposing Iran. And Iran is gathering their nations, they're weaponizing, and they're making connections with Germany and with the people in Turkey and with Gog and Magog, which is Russia. A lot of information I know, but I'm trying to throw this out. It's so exciting what is happening. So he makes a 7-year contract. The middle of that time is where he goes in and proclaims himself to be God, which we see in Thessalonians. And at this time, this is what's called the abomination of desolation in Daniel chapter 9. We also see it, Jesus talks about it in Matthew 24, in Mark 13, Luke 21, and these passages to when he's talking about the end times. So, now when he goes in and does that, here's the 14th fact, is he sets himself up as God. Get that out of Daniel chapter 11. He says he's a God above gods. We see this in 2 Thessalonians 4. He sits on the throne saying he's God, making himself out to be God, acting like he's the creator type thing. So he'll set himself up as God. Not like we're all little gods, but that he is God. He's the leader. He's the supernatural being that should be worshipped. Everything's subservient to him. He's going to be promising something like extended life, cybernetics, transhumanism, something that's going to try to compete with eternal life that Christ gives us. It won't compete. But he's going to have this panacea out there for people. And the real factor for him is that he's going to preach an unrighteousness. Go be what you want to be as far as homosexual, bisexual. You want to, do drugs. You want to do all these things. I'm not going to have any of those kind of rules. Our society is not going to have any constraints. And that's the spirit of Antichrist to the max. So 14, he'll set himself up like God. 15, he will profane the temple. So by doing this, the abomination of desolation, the temple was never meant to be used after Christ's sacrifice. It comes into being again, the what we would call traditionally the third temple. You would have, and some say a fourth temple, because you had Solomon's original temple, the exile temple when they came back, then you had Herod's temple being rebuilt, but it was on the same building structure as before, or at least they believe that. So it's kind of like a refurbishing of that temple. So you could say this is the third temple or the fourth complete temple, some would say. In this situation, it isn't just that he uses the temple. It's an affront to the blood of Jesus Christ. This is the abomination. That Jesus shed his blood for every man, woman, and child. And because of that, he being divine, he paid the price for everybody. When he puts an end to the sacrifices and commits this abomination, whether it's a pig or something on the temple, he's basically thumbing his nose at God himself. This is letting people know this is a complete standoff between Satan and Jesus Christ. There's no bones about it. This isn't a secret thing, and this is right in what should be a holy temple where it should be God's throne. It's like It's like a king of the hill thing, right? I've taken the top. I dare you to kick me off. This is what's going on. God is patient for 3.5 years, but he kicks him off, as we'll see. 16, he'll destroy all false religions, all religious systems, so that he may rule unhindered. So we've talked about this. He's going to be religious genius. But we talked about the world system. At this time, though, when the Jews turn and say, oh my gosh, we made a mistake, you're not the Messiah, we reject you, it says specifically he begins to persecute the children of God. So any Christians who have become saved during the tribulation period, and any of the Jews, whether they are Christians or not, get severe persecution. So there's no religious tolerance. So not only the world system, and not only can you not buy or sell unless you take that, that's not good enough. He's going to step up and say, look, these guys are the enemies. These guys are the intolerant ones, even though they're really the tolerant ones. These guys are the ones who murder, even though he's a murderer. These guys are the ones who cause chaos and destroy and hold down your freedoms, which is just the opposite. Because if you become a servant of sin, you become in bondage to sin. To have Jesus Christ, you're free from sin. Having truth frees you from this bondage of the mind and sets you free. Having the freedom of power of holiness and sanctification and righteousness allows you to be a person who's not in bondage to the sex or the drugs or the lying or the garbage, the hedonism that's going to be going on. So he's going to destroy all other religions, including the world religions, but he's going to specifically go after any saved individuals, any of the elect of Israel during this time. 17, he's going to briefly rule over all nations. So we talked a little bit about this. He's got that 10 confederate conglomeration of nations, but it's going to be just like the statue in Daniel. So Nebuchadnezzar was king over pretty much the whole world, but not every speck and corner. There were independent groups and tribes and lords here and there. But for the most part, he was controlling the world. Nobody at that time could come against him at his height. And that's what it means on this controlling world power. He's going to come in, and now not just the 10 nations, all power and authority is given to him through the nations, not in heaven and earth, just on earth. But there are things like the kings of the east rebel against him, and they begin to come down, crossing the river Euphrates and down into Israel. There's going to be this Battle of Armageddon. And so what we begin to see is, though, that he has this power over the people, power over most nations, like the United Nations and that sort of thing. And this is going to happen. And I'm putting this, even though I mentioned this before, this is kind of in chronological order. This doesn't happen until about a third of the way into the middle of the tribulation period. So what we see is number 18, he will utterly be crushed by the Lord Jesus Christ at the Battle of Armageddon. So during this time, he's going to have this rebellion going on against Christ. He's the Antichrist. Everything against Judeo-Christian law and order and thought, and against God himself. But Christ is going to return, and this is what's called the second coming, or the second advent. Christ is going to return with his church. We come with him, and he will speak a word out of his mouth. It says by the breath of his mouth, which is a modern translation would be, he just speaks. They have their weapons, they have all this thing. He just speaks, just like he spoke in creation that came about. He can speak and deconstruct, and their bodies just decompose and wipe out. Matter of fact, we see this in the 19th point, is that they are actually going to corrode their bodies, when he speaks this word and he's crushed as Christ comes out, that the Antichrist body and all the people that have come out against Christ will actually, his actual demise will be that his flesh disintegrates off his body. The sinews, everything else will just flow. And that's where you get the whole idea of Armageddon, and the blood will flow about to the horse's bridle about, geez, it's 180 miles long, but in certain areas it's going to be about 5 feet deep, because think about all this, 200 million man army, and all armies like you've never seen before. A good portion of the people who've made it through this time are going to be there, and they're wiped out. Then it says, as a 20th fact, that he will be the first creature thrown into the lake of fire, Revelation 19:20. He immediately gets judged, not the great white throne judgment, anything else. It's go to jail, go immediately to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. The false prophet, the Antichrist, are immediately sent to the lake of fire, where they're tormented for their sins forever and ever. We see Satan being locked up for a millennia, for 1,000 years. So this is the whole topic of the Antichrist, kind of nutshelled together. We're bringing it down. We didn't go through. We'll post the scriptures. You saw the scriptures posted. But just so you kind of have an idea of what's going on. So, man, you could do like a 9 weeks course in this, right? But I wanted to give you, I like doing these brief synopses. We seem to have really high playthrough on them. And people seem to say, hey, that really helped me kind of bring things into perspective. Help me to kind of figure out what's going on and put the pieces together. So I hope this blessed you. Keep the chin up, because guess what? When it says you see these things come to pass, it says look up, for your redemption draws near.